Kim, what, nu, may be, baleshu, among the less intelligent persons, shurena, by the powerful, kalina, by the personality of Kali, dhira, self-controlled, viruna, by one who is afraid of, apramata, one who is careful, pramateshu, among the careless, one who, vrika, tiger, nrishu, among men, vartate, exists. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Parikshit considered that less intelligent men might find the personality of Kali to be very powerful, but that those who are self-controlled would have nothing to fear. The king was powerful like a tiger and took care for the foolish, careless persons. Please repeat. Maharaj Parikshit considered that less intelligent men might find the personality of Kali to be very powerful, but that those who are self-controlled would have nothing to fear. The king was powerful like a tiger and took care for the foolish, careless persons. Purport. Those who are not devotees of the Lord are careless and unintelligent. Unless one is thoroughly intelligent, one cannot be a devotee of the Lord. Those who are not devotees of the Lord fall prey to the actions of Kali. It will not be possible to bring about a saner condition in society unless we are prepared to accept the modes of action adopted by Maharaj Parikshit. That is, propagation of the devotional service of the Lord to the common man. Om Agyanati Varandasya Garanjadasya Chakshurumiritam Gena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Morning, everyone. I was reflecting before I touch on this particular verse here. In the preceding verses, the magnanimity of Maharaj Parikshit in dealing with Kali. I know that if someone has done me wrong or someone has encroached upon my space or something, not so quick to forgive. But here, Kali, who is the personification of the dark elements, the moment he surrendered to Parikshit Maharaj, at that moment, Parikshit was willing to accommodate him. He just didn't say, well, look, sorry, this is what you did, and there's no two ways about it. I'm not going to facilitate you. No, he facilitated him. And it just shows the exalted position of Parikshit Maharaj. He wasn't acting out of simply sentiment. Oh, this guy has surrendered, so this will make me look good now if I facilitate him. No. He understands. He understands the position of a living entity, and he's acting out of full sense control, full knowledge. And it reminded me, it actually parallels the situation between Vishnu and Papa Purusha. We're celebrating Papa Purusha's pastimes tomorrow. Ekadashi. You've heard the story of Ekadashi? How did Ekadashi manifest in this world? Anybody want to hear it? Most of you have heard it, but all right, I'll go briefly. This was actually, pardon me? Plain as it looks, well, I'll try to remember what I read. It came out, it was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj who initially wrote it in the 50s, and then in 1979 a devotee named Pyankata Brahmachari, he translated it into English. And the story goes that Jaimini is a disciple of Vyasadeva, was approached Vyasadeva and said, you've explained to me the glories of Mother Ganges and the benefits of worshipping Lord Vishnu and so many other transcendental experiences. And he said, could you please explain to me how Ekadashi manifested in this world, and what is the purpose of following Ekadashi, and where did she appear, and what are the faults of not following Ekadashi? So Vyasadeva naturally was very excited, when just like Sukadeva Goswami becomes very, very animated when he's being presented with a question by Parikshit. So Vyasadeva went on to explain that in the beginning of creation, there was the Lord created living entities, non-living entities, and along with that, he created a personality who was the embodiment of all sins, and that person would be responsible for causing suffering to sinful people. And so we got to remember now that Vishnu's created this. This is an important element. So this personality, his name was Papa Purusha. Papa means sin, Purusha, person. And his head was the embodiment of the sins of murdering a Brahmin. His eyes were the sins of intoxication. His arms of killing cows, and in so many ways. Different parts of his bodies were like atrocious reminders of sinful activities. You just imagine bumping into that person on the back street at night. So then he thought to himself, now someone has to be able to control this person. Right? So then he created, Yamaraj was manifest as a result of this desire. And one day, Vishnu went to visit Yamaraj, and Yamaraj received him very nicely and sat him on the throne, and then Lord Vishnu started to hear this crying, loud crying. He says, what is that? Yamaraj says, oh, these are the sinful living entities. They're being punished. They were sent to different planets and they're being punished. So Vishnu wanted to go see. So he went out, and when he saw the living entities cry, when the living entities saw Lord Vishnu, they began to cry even louder. And that is the nature of people who are sinful. When they see a devotee, actually sometimes they become even more disturbed. We've seen this on Harinam many times. I remember one time in Canada, actually, where, I don't know, Nitya, if you were there, but Kirtananda came up to a small town in Ontario. This was when the Christ and Krishna book, some of these interviews were taking place in this one house. And so we were outside chanting. People were gathered, they were very curious. But when the chanting was taking place, naturally some of the people became very disturbed. They were going around in a pickup truck, screaming and throwing rotten eggs at us. So, this is not uncommon. When the holy name is present, there's some purification that takes place. So, the living entities were screaming, crying, and then Lord Vishnu began to think, out of compassion, I caused this. because I cause the happiness, ultimately. I cause the happiness and the pleasure of all living beings. So I got to do something about it. So he manifested as Ekadashi. And when Ekadashi became manifest, there was no possibility. There was no possibility of sin being present. Immediately all sins were eradicated throughout the whole universe. So what happened next was Papa Purusha, he came lamenting, crying. He says, wherever I go, this Ekadashi is manifest and I can't be present before. And he said, and he had a very good point. Papa Purusha said, if all living entities become liberated on this day of Ekadashi, who will carry out all your pastimes in this world? There won't be anybody left. So Lord Vishnu began to laugh, seeing the plight. And Papa Purusha, it wasn't funny for him, because he was, this would extinguish his existence. So Lord Vishnu had compassion upon him also. Just like Parikshit Maharaj, Kali is coming before him, and he says, look, you're ready to kill me, so he surrenders. Well, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? In your kingdom, there's no place for sin. So Parikshit Maharaj made a situation so that the personality of Kali could continue on with his activities. So similarly, Lord Vishnu told Papa Purusha, okay, so on this day, you can go reside in grains. Because prior to that, Papa Purusha was trying to take shelter here, trying to take shelter of men, demigods, forests, trees, animals. He couldn't find shelter anywhere because Ekadashi was present. So then Vishnu said, take shelter in grains. So on that day, Ekadashi, which is tomorrow, Papa Purusha is present in the grain. And one mouthful of grain is equal to killing millions of brahmanas. Anyway, so here in this verse, Parikshit Maharaj is mentioned that he, because he was so powerful, he had no fear of Kali. And because he had no fear, as mentioned in the previous verse, there was no envy. And it's mentioned also here that, but for those who are not intelligent and are not self-controlled, there is fear of Kali. Why? Why is there fear of Kali? What is the relation between being self-controlled and not having fear of Kali? Kali encourages sinful activity. Kali encourages irreligious principles, which of all are the four basic principles of irreligion: meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. So naturally, one who's endeavoring to control the senses will not be so fearful of Kali because of knowledge. It's explained that intelligence is the capacity to learn, to reason, and to understand. To learn, reason, and understand. Now, the big question now is to learn, to reason, and to understand what? Because materialists are very, very intelligent also. I was just thinking about a commercial that I saw years and years ago. Actually, it was Super Bowl game, right? Actually, it was only like 3 years ago, maybe. Anyway, so in this commercial, and you have to understand also, these commercials, they pay like millions and millions of dollars just to get 30 seconds. What can you do with 30 seconds? That requires a lot of intelligence to capture the attention of your audience in 30 seconds after spending so much money and to get the results that you want. And I thought it was very, very clever because it reminded me, I'll start off with letting you know what it reminded me of. It reminded me of Lord Chaitanya when he was a baby, when he was a child, and he would cry. You all know the story? How he stopped crying. They would start chanting. And they would stop chanting, what would happen? He starts crying again. He starts chanting, stops crying, stop chanting, he starts crying. Like that. Goes on and on. And the ladies were enjoying this. So this commercial, there was this little baby in a swing. He was in a house. The baby was in the swing. And the swing would go back one way, and he'd be crying. And then the swing would come up, and then he'd start smiling and laughing. And then the swing would go back, and he'd be crying. And then the swing would come up again, and he'd be laughing. And then the camera turns to what the child was looking at. When he was going back, there was a window, and he couldn't see anything. And when the swing came up, he would see the big M, McDonald's. Just see how intelligent they are. Huh? But for what purpose? For what purpose? Krishna describes this intelligent one who is restrained his senses and who fixes his mind upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence, which requires knowledge, transcendental knowledge. Those who are without this knowledge, transcendental knowledge, can have neither a controlled mind nor a steady intelligence, without which there's no possibility of peace. And without no possibility of happiness. Now, how can there be any happiness without peace? So, So Parikshit had full control of his senses, and therefore he was able to confront the personality of Kali and also to deal with the situation in a way that was beneficial for all, including the personality of Kali. So I'll go on to the next verse here. Upavarnitam mitadva punyam parikshitam maya vasudeva katopetam akyanam yad aprichata. O sages, as you did ask me, now I have described almost everything regarding the narrations about Lord Krishna in connection with the history of the pious Maharaj Parikshit. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is the history of the activities of the Lord, and the activities of the Lord are performed in relation with the devotees of the Lord. Therefore, the history of the devotees is not different from the history of Lord Krishna's activities. A devotee of the Lord regards both the activities of the Lord and those of his pure devotees on an equal level, for they are all transcendental. So here Sutta Goswami is saying, I've described almost everything regarding the narrations of Lord Krishna. I'm guessing that he didn't speak about Parikshit, what happened afterwards. Nityadita was mentioning in class when Mother Uttara came to inquire from Parikshit Maharaj about what he had heard. And speaking of hearing also, as Ray Prabhu was saying in class yesterday, that in this day and age, we must commit a sinful act to get the results, whereas in previous ages, just thinking about it. But the caution is the more we think of something sinful, then there's a great likelihood that by the thoughts, then the words will be spoken, then the action will be spoken, then a habit is developed, and then character is developed. Well, the same thing applies also for training our thoughts so that spiritual character can be developed. Same principle. We just change the subject matter. One is self-centered. What am I going to get out of this? The other is God-centered. So here, the activities of Parikshit Maharaj are relishable to hear because they're all in relationship to Lord Krishna. His forefathers were all devotees of Lord Krishna. So we've heard so many wonderful pastimes in regards to this. The whole battle of Kurukshetra that took place, the discourse of grandfather Bhishma on his bed of arrows, inspiring Yudhisthira to take up the rule of the kingdom. So many incredible activities, so many wonderful pastimes. But all of these would not be attractive to a devotee if it was not that Krishna was the inspiration behind all of these wonderful pastimes. And it really boils down to consciousness and awareness and searching out the origin of a subject matter to be able to connect it. I just read, there was a beautiful line that I read the other day. A devotee, Srila Prabhupada says, wants to excavate and find that Krishna is behind everything. He's trying to excavate. There are great personalities in this world, undoubtedly, who perform wonderful acts. They have great fortunes. They perform so many incredible sacrifices. And the more we look into their lives, we become more fascinated. Sometimes we become people will spend, just if you go to a library, for example, and you look at all the books, biographies that were written about different people. Just one person, and you'll see 5, 6, 7 different biographies by different authors, digging in deeper and deeper into the activities, the sayings, the words of such personalities, their opulences, their character, and so on. And we become attracted to this. And we can also become attracted without becoming implicated in simply mundane matters when we tie it all into who is the source behind all this opulence? Who is the source behind this fame and wealth and and fortune? If a celebrity, for example, and we've all experienced this, it enters into our discussions. Oh, so and so, some big celebrity mentioned Krishna's name, and then for a devotee, that's headlines. For the materialist, oh, this person said Hare Krishna, and it just goes over the top of their heads. But a devotee hears Krishna's name from some personality who has influence in society, then that's a big thing. Why is that? Because we can see the potential behind the name being mentioned once. That potential is inconceivable. We don't know where that name will end. It says there's 3 things that we cannot take back. An arrow that's been shot in flight cannot be taken back. A word that is spoken cannot be retrieved. And an opportunity that is lost cannot be retrieved also. So words to reflect on how important it is to choose our words and our thoughts, and to seek out every opportunity. Krishna advises Arjuna, let not the wise disrupt the minds of those who are attached to fruit of action. They should not be refrained from doing work, but to work in the spirit of devotion. So simply by adding that to the recipe, the consciousness of devotional service, then the seed and the root of fruit of desire and mental speculation can gradually be burnt. So to sum it up here, Parikshit was qualified, self-controlled, therefore he had no fear of Kali and was able to deal with him accordingly. And likewise, if we take this opportunity to have of this training, we can also become fearless in spreading Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, propagating the devotional service of the Lord to the common man. And the other verse is that the activities of the devotees are equally relishable as the activities of the Lord, because the purpose is the same, is developing that transcendental loving relationship. So I'll stop here if there are any comments or questions. Mathura Prabhu? Yeah, it's not working.
Yes, thank you very much, bro. It's a really great class. Appreciate it. I believe you touched on training and cultivating these. Please forgive me, I'm pretty a little tired, but these qualities. I was thinking earlier this morning, actually, because I heard it mentioned from I forget who, maybe it was Tamal Krishna or somebody on the ISKCON Desire Tree, that these qualities need to be cultivated and practiced. And although that verse says that the devotee automatically develops the qualities of the demigods, but still we have to consciously, depending on where we're at, I mean, maybe we're already a pure devotee coming into this life, but a lot of us, like myself, I'm not. And we have to cultivate and practice. And what I found that it's like, vishamidam, like poison. It feels like poison. It felt to me like poison, more like when I first joined, when the devotees were telling me, well, you think you offended that devotee? Go pay obeisances to him. And on my mind, it's like, oh no, I won't do that. I don't, because, it goes against the conditioned grain, which is our disease. So it seems like that one devotee, Pushpadanta Prabhu, used to say, no pain, no gain. And so I guess a spiritual life seems like that. Not all the time. Hopefully as we go on, it gets nicer, even doing things that we wouldn't have done before or felt very difficult to do. We can do it a lot more easier, and we get more even a taste for doing it. I mean, it's possible. So, do you have any comment about that? I don't know.
Well, the things that comes to my mind is that in our dealings with others, it's not uncommon that sometimes the edges are a little rough, it's a little difficult. We become easily agitated by what is being said, and but we should also remember it's not really surprising. I mean, I'll give you an example. You're all familiar with IKEA, right? IKEA's got this box. You open it up, you got all these parts. Who hasn't been frustrated and tried to put one of those together sometimes, Sure, all the parts are there. It's some frustration. So out of frustration comes anger, right? Or my case, for example, like technology, this computer technology, and so on, the language involved, and understanding the science, what to speak of how it works, and how it's built, and how this message gets across. How do you see a picture from? I mean, this is just practically inconceivable. And I've been frustrated so many times in trying to deal with it. Of course, I'm starting off. My desire needs to be checked, but so it's very, very frustrating. What to speak of each other? We remain mysteries to ourselves. We're trying to understand who we are. This great science of distinguishing the soul from matter, the workings of the minds, the workings of the intelligence, the covering effects of the false ego. And then we deal with each other, and I'm thinking, oh man, I got you figured out. I don't have you figured out. I don't know what happened to you an hour ago. I don't know what happened to you during the week. I don't know what kind of baggage you're carrying from your previous life. The effects of the modes of nature, constantly pulling, tossing. The threefold miseries of existence, constantly, challenging us. So there's a story about a man who was in the subway. You might have told it before here, and he was sitting there and he was watching across the other seats. These kids were jumping up and down and screaming and making so much noise, and the father was sitting there doing nothing. So the person observing this started to become a little agitated, because he had a long ride and these people were still on that same ride, and it was like going on, and they were just screaming and shouting, and the man was just sitting there not doing anything. Finally, the other rider asked the man, he made a comment as, boy, the kids are really pretty active, huh? He was upset. He was very aggravated. And the other man, the father of the kids, replied, oh, he was somewhere else. He was, sorry. He says, they just lost their mother. So the rider had a totally different perspective afterwards. So this, again, is the importance of in order to be able to control the senses and control the mind, it's imperative that we acquire knowledge and understanding. And knowledge of understanding of each other's we can have by hearing. Hearing, one of the principles of loving relationships between devotees. Hearing confidentially and speaking confidentially. And confidence is very important, of course, because we've seen how that's, over the years, sometimes that element of confidence was not honored and has caused great distress for some. I don't know if that touches on your point, your question or comment.
Thank you very much for the class. The last verse was speaking directly about the equality or maybe superiority of glorifying the devotees. I have that the glorification of the devotee is equal to, is that what it says?
Non-different from the history of Lord Krishna's activities.
Probably says here, the history of the devotees is not different from the history of Lord Krishna's activities.
Mm-hmm.
They're on an equal level.
Mm.
Activities of the devotees, because they're all transcendental. I think that's a very, very important point to reflect on. And we were reading Nectar of Devotion every night. We're reading, and there was a section on serving the devotees, and then there's a few quotes. The famous quote from between when Parvati inquires, "What's the greatest kind of worship?"
What is the
She's inquiring from Lord Shiva, "What's the greatest kind of worship?" Remember that?
Worshipping the devotees.
Worshipping of Lord Vishnu is the best,
Yeah.
he said, but better than worshipping Vishnu is the worship of his devotees. And then there was another quote from the, I believe, Adi Purana, when Arjuna and Krishna are discussing, and Krishna says to Arjuna, "One who claims to be my devotee is not my devotee, but one who claims to be a devotee of my devotee is my devotee." So we were reflecting how in the construction of Prabhupada's palace, how there was a misunderstanding amongst the God brothers at the time, not the New Vrindavan God brothers, but the movement God brothers, and they went to Prabhupada and they said, "Why is New Vrindavan spending so much money on this palace? Wouldn't it be better to take the money, print books, and distribute them?" And Prabhupada, "No, this is actually our philosophy, that things offered to the guru," or maybe there was also a complaint that why aren't they building a temple for Krishna? And Prabhupada, so there was two complaints. One is, they're wasting money. And they should be building a temple for Krishna. At least if they're going to build a temple for Krishna. And they said, "No, this is our philosophy. That when the spiritual master is satisfied, when something's offered to the spiritual master, it's non-different. It's completely transparent to offer it to Krishna." So it's a really good point here, that the glorification of Goswami, Goswami Astaka? Sad Goswami Astaka. Well, these are prayers to the devotees, but the prayers are glorifying Krishna, or Gurvastaka, we sing. Prayers to the Guru. It's prayers glorifying Krishna. So, as I sometimes, a devotee asked me one time, "How come, for Mangal Arati, we're Radhavadavan Chandra's giving their audience and we're singing songs to, we're singing the prayers to the spiritual master? Isn't there something, that's a very neophyte understanding, Shouldn't we be singing, Viva Vadishesha, the songs glorifying person? No, glorifying the pure devotee is actually more pleasing to Krishna than when you chant his own glories, according to our philosophy. It's a very, very simple purport, but I thought it was very powerful. I mean, you could comment on that.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of glorifying, like Krishna being pleased with his devotee being glorified. I mean, that's even there in for the common man, generally. The father's always eager to see the child surpass him in his abilities. And so, I mean, it's inherent in the genuine feeling of wanting to see another being glorified. It's a genuine thing. Of course, there's the perspective of that is important. The knowledge of knowing where that ultimately that all credit rests is in Krishna. But nevertheless, the glorification of his devotees is. What is the example about Sukadeva Goswami? Sukha is a parrot, right? And he takes when the mango is touched by a parrot. Is that what the example is? And it becomes sweeter. So. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is the answer. Anything else? Let's thank it, Prabhu.
So thank you, Prabhu. Nice explanation about glorification of the devotees. So we all know that devotees glorifies the Lord. But if you see in the 1,000 years back, the Lord personally glorified the devotee with a nice sloka. In Tirupati, Balaji, he personally glorified the disciple of Ramanujacharya. His name is Anantalvar. He made a sloka that I am the servant of this Alvar. So wonderfully he glorified Balaji to the devotee. But we never seen anywhere Bhagavatam, Lord glorifies the devotee in a Sanskrit verse. But here Lord Balaji is glorified the Anantalvar, the great Alvars. Akilatma gunavasam ajnanati mirabham ashritanam sucharanam vande anantarya deshikam Srimad Ramanujacharya Sri Padavambarohtvayam saduttamanga sandaryam anantarya maham bhaje. I am glorifying the disciple of Ramanujacharya. He is a ocean of mercy. I am his disciple. Lord is telling that I am the disciple of my devotee. Such a powerful the sloka. So whoever goes to the Balaji, if you pray this mantra, even though you need not to go to the temple, just stand outside and glorify this mantra, Lord will see you. My devotee, who is that devotee is glorifying my devotee? And people are in the big line, but they don't know how to see Balaji. So if you pray this mantra, the Lord Balaji, they'll see that person. So that place is also there, backside of the temple. So it's such a beauty of the devotee's glorification. Thank you.
Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.